Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. And this week we're looking at it's a client market, but what actually does that mean? And I think we talk a lot about some of the stats that we give out, etc. We know that the market is changing heavily towards a client market. So I'm going to give you stats that are very generic across all sales businesses, but I think they have an absolute viewpoint of how the clients are thinking and how we should be looking at how we address a client's market. So 93% of customers are likely to make a repeat purchase with a company who offer excellent customer service. And that came from HubSpot. A customer service experience heavily impacts recommendations, and customers who rate customer service as good are 38% more times likely to recommend a company. 80% of companies that use customer satisfaction scores to analyze customer experience improve, create an improved experience after understanding their stats, and that came from Harvard Business Review. It takes 12 positive customer experiences to make up for one negative experience. 80% of customers say they will experience a company or say the experience a company provides is as necessary as the product or services that it's selling. And 87% of consumers read online reviews of businesses in 2020, and we know that's going to have increased now in 2024. And 79% of customers who share their complaints online see their complaints ignored. 75% of customers desire a consistent experience regardless of how they engage with the company, whether it be through social media, through a person, through a phone, and that came from Salesforce. One of the big stats that we pulled out, or I pulled out, was, in fact, 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for great customer experience. And so to put that, 50% of customers won't recommend the business with a poorly designed website or mobile website. According to one survey, 72% of customers will share a positive experience with 6 people. But on the other hand, if a customer is not happy, 13% of them will share that experience with more than 15 people. And 91% of customers would use an online knowledge base if it were available to review tailored services. It's really interesting what sort of customers are doing and what clients are doing with regards to their experience and how they deal with recruitment agencies and how they deal with sales. So it's a client market, and this is the products that you're selling. So this is how they will perceive those. So we've got Paul and Dave on today. And so we're going to jump straight in. We've got a lot to cover. Okay. So first question. What are the most common reasons recruitment agencies become obscure to their client market, and how can they overcome these challenges?
I think we've become an industry that's become a little bit too what's the phrase I would use? Insular, in the sense that pre-COVID, most recruitment businesses spent a huge amount of time in front of clients, going out, meeting them, meeting candidates. I mean, back in the old days, inverted commas, we had candidates coming into the offices. Those things don't really happen much any longer. And I think what we've become is a bit invisible very often. It's very easy to sit behind the desk, work very hard all day, glaring at a screen, talking to people on the phone, of course, but ultimately not actually developing relationships. And I think that one of the reasons that people have become or businesses are becoming a bit obscure, not necessarily as visible as they should be, is that we've got to get back to the human touch, improving the level of human interaction with our clients and candidates. What we used to do extremely well 7, 8 years ago, we need to get back to, not least because, as we've been talking consistently, AI will gradually take over some of the much more mundane tasks in our industry, leaving us to use our human experiences, human instincts to get out and start to develop the sort of relationships that will embed us in organizations and build our trusted advisor positioning. So the answer, I think, is we've got to get back to the old-fashioned methods and embrace the new technology that will improve our profiles.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're so right, Paul. It's more difficult to stand out than ever before. But I think one of the reasons why some agencies become more obscure is they simply don't ask their clients, what is it about what we do that you value? There's so many different recruitment services that clients use, and it doesn't matter whether we're a 2-person company or a 22-person company or a 222-person company. We're providing a service they're paying for, but sometimes it's just a necessary service, and sometimes it's something they really value. So I would encourage us all to be constantly asking clients and prospects, because the way to turn a prospect into a client is to offer them something that they value and ask them, what is it that what we do that you really like? What is it that you don't like? What can we do better? What new services can we do? And if you're constantly having that discussion, to your point, Paul, about building relationships, then you're going to become less obscure. And you may even become even more sticky with your clients because you're doing what they want you to do and they're paying you for it.
It's an interesting comment. There's two sort of comments I'm going to pick out from what you both said there, because I think you're both right in exactly what we've said. And I think I'm going to add to that is that you said that, Paul, that lots of recruitment agencies visit their clients. I think still prior to lockdown, there was still only a handful of the really good recruitment agencies that went out and visited their clients. And it was interesting, Dave, you said it was difficult to stand out in a crowded market. It's always difficult to stand out if you're doing the same thing over and over again and the same as everybody else. So it is quite easy to stand out, but you've got to do something different. So I think what's happening is why people have become a little bit obscure to their client base is I think they've started to believe their own hype and that everyone in their market knows them, when in reality, really, only a handful of customers actually do know them. And what that means by customers, I'm talking about buyers. Dave, you always talk about you don't get involved with the client, you get involved with the buyer inside that client. So it's not the client themselves, it's the buyers. And I think our services become almost generic. And I think we become very blasé once we've made the sale. So we sell it once and then never sell our services again. So clients quickly forget about our services, especially if they're not using that part. Let's say they're using a perm service and they want a temporary person or a contractor, and they don't think that we do that because we've not told them about that service. Or we told them years ago about that service, but we've never reintroduced that sale. So we've never gone back and talked to them. So I think, immediately we get that, we didn't use it. And I think that's the vanity of the recruitment agency because they think everyone knows us. And I think it's the blasé behavior of once we've sold it that compounds it, that then agencies are seen as a one-stop shop for one type of thing and not for multiple opportunities by the client. And therefore, we do become obscure to our clients. So I think we've got to get better at selling our services more often. And that links back to visiting your clients and doing things that are different, that stands out. And if you're doing that, then you're going to stand out from your competitors because you're always telling them something slightly different about how you can do that.
Yeah.
So the next question I think that we can sort of jump in on then is, how can a recruitment agency leverage their client value proposition or services to increase their visibility of their services to their current client base?
I'm going to pick up on Dave's theme here because I think increasingly when we're in front of clients, it's about asking broader HR style questions. So it's not just about the obvious. What vacancies can we help you with, or what temp or contract assignments can we assist you with? That's a given. Obviously, that's why we're there. I think it's asking the broader questions around what assistance, what support do you need across a whole HR remit. So what's keeping you awake at night? What are your biggest challenges? What are the fears that you have about what's coming around the bend, what's coming around the corner? What are your plans for the next 6 months, 12 months, and so forth? And I think without necessarily coming up with the instant solutions, which I wouldn't advise anyway, I think we need to step back from their concerns, go back to the office, discuss the issues and challenges our clients have, and then go back to them with some well thought through solutions and ideas, innovations, and see if we can provide a level of services to our clients that go beyond just purely providing quality staff. And when you talk to the large RPOs now, and we've listened to quite a few recently, that's exactly what they're now doing with their client base. What else can we do for you aside from what you pay us to do? And I think that when you're looking at our CVPs and increasing our visibility, and you want to step away from being one of the horde of recruitment businesses that those customers are using, you have to be asking much broader questions and be thinking internally about, well, how do we provide the kind of support to our clients that they really need? And the only answer, the only way you're ever going to find that out isn't to be sending emails or e-shots or post questions. It's to physically be in front of clients and work as a proper consultant, asking broader questions, deeper questions. That also means looking to leverage your existing relationships with the people that work with you in those businesses to see if we can get in front of very senior people in the organization who are in a position to be able to influence decisions within the organization and may have a bigger insight, a clearer insight into this kind of support they're looking for. So that's where I'd be going. And I'm certainly advising my clients to be asking those kind of questions now, because I think it's super important that we become consultative rather than recruitment consultants.
Yeah, it's so right. I'm doing a piece of work with a client at the moment on a client value proposition. Because my assumption, and Paul, I may be very, very wrong in this, my assumption is most clients, most recruitment companies don't have a client value proposition. They provide
Correct.
things to our clients. So the question had assumes that everybody has one. Actually, most don't. So I'm working with a client at the moment in the tech space, and we're building a client value proposition, but we're building it with three of that recruitment agent's trusted clients. And for a very, very nice lunch, which would probably turn out to be more expensive than we had thought, we are buying, if you like, the client's time, and they're helping us to build a client value proposition. And again, it goes back to my point about 222 or 222. It doesn't matter how big your business is, you can get some external support. We can support you. You can get someone to help you build a client value proposition.
Yeah.
And until you've got one, in some respects, the question's kind of redundant because you've got to have one in the first place.
Yep.
So I think you've helped me answer the question how I was going to answer it. That first and foremost, all agencies need to understand clients and what clients are buying and what product services you can offer and how you offer them in a different way. Yep. So having a very generic service, and I think that's what you're saying, Dave, that most recruitment agencies have a very generic service that no longer actually cuts the mustard. And so if you actually want to differentiate yourself and your products, it actually means building a client value proposition and then more importantly, marketing that proposition consistently to your clients. Yeah. Where clients have so much choice, you're getting your brand and service in front of them on multiple platforms, both your brand proposition, face-to-face, etc., which links back into Paul, is really important. So your brand sort of becomes the most important thing that you create and live and breathe. And that CVP is sort of part of your brand. So how you market, how you deliver your CVP then becomes a barometer of your quality. And it also helps separate you from your marketplace. So if your marketing isn't bringing that out, then you've got to look at your marketing. If your product and service when you're selling to clients is missing the mark, then you've got to create a better product and service to sell your client. So your CVP needs to be displayed, I think, clearly and easily understood online. You need to have social proof of your services, and therefore how you sell your services and how the clients meet your brand, get delivered by your brand and feel about your brand becomes the biggest buying point that you can deliver in a brand. And I think we've got to start to look at that. And I think you're right, Dave. I've been working on several clients with a client in Sheffield last week, and we spent a whole day working on the client value proposition and then working on how we then acquire clients by using that proposition. Yeah. And it start from email campaigns right through to human acquisition campaigns, the hearts and mind campaigns, the whole lot. Okay. And it was really interesting because we're not talking about reinventing the wheel. We're talking about how we present that wheel to the client. Yeah. And it's a very different thing. So here's a question. I did sort of think about this when I wrote this question.
Glad you thought about it, Howard. It's important to do that.
It is, and sometimes I just don't. But this time I thought I'd thought about this because I thought I've got to answer this question at some point as well. So what techniques or tools can be used to identify high potential clients that might be hiding in plain sight?
Well, I think it's a great question, actually. Surprisingly, considering you wrote it, Howard. So
Thanks for that, Paul. Thanks for that.
That's all right. Thank praise and all that. I genuinely, I think it's a great question. I think agencies, recruitment businesses need to have their radars full on. And I think, when we talk to our clients and we talk to a lot of people, very often you look at the number of clients using the business and you find that it's a fairly lean number of clients who regularly use their businesses. And indeed, often you find that they have a small number of high users who take up a very high percentage of the spend, which is always extremely dangerous. Having lots of eggs in one or two small a number of eggs in small baskets, so to speak. My view about this question is this, that I think that we have to be really focused as an industry, but certainly as recruitment businesses, on lead generation. And I know this is going to sound old-fashioned, but most of lead generation comes directly from the candidates that we should be spending all day talking to. Where are they working? What's going on in their businesses? How did they get that role in the first place? And who are they talking to? And I'd like to think people listening to this will know all those questions. The leads are often sitting right under our noses. We need to also be very aware of what's going on in the industry sectors we're involved in. So, of course, to be listening to webinars, be involved in podcasts, to be putting out Google alerts, to be tracking the websites of our major clients, and so on. I mean, you've got to be really on top of this. Now, I think what's very interesting when we talk to clients about their regular metrics, their KPIs, if you want to give them the old-fashioned expressions, very rarely do I come across people that talk about daily lead generation numbers. It's almost never. They'll talk about the amount of interviews that they're tracking per day or the CVs they're sending out. I don't often hear people talk about the fact that they give their people targets around lead generation. So when we talk in the morning, at the morning stand-ups, the morning meetings, what leads did you get the previous day? And I believe these leads are literally surrounding us constantly, but we don't ask the right questions and we don't focus our people on them. And you could also talk to our bonus plans in any way, shape or form related to lead generation. So it's a really big question, Howard. I know we're going to run out of time. I could spend an awful long time answering this. I'll let Dave jump in here.
Well, you said a word that sparked something for me, Paul. You used the word radar. So I have no idea how old some of the people are.
I know where we're going with this one.
Webinar. But one of my favourite shows in the
MASH.
80s was MASH. And one of the main candidates in MASH was Radar. And Radar's job was to provide the doctors with information about where the bombs were, where the incoming helicopters were. His job was to keep them in tune with everything that was going on. And as you said that word, I then thought of Radar and thought that's exactly it. We have to map our clients. We have to map who's on the board of our clients. Yeah, most of our clients won't be huge, but they'll have a board. Does that board have a number of non-exec directors? How many of those non-exec directors are on other boards? Why don't we get in contact with the non-exec directors and say we're providing service A to you on this client? Can we do that for any of your other clients? It's just about intelligently using the data that is so ubiquitous with LinkedIn and everything we've got there. It's just about taking that time, and it's that slow down to speed up approach. Actually mapping the clients, finding out who do we know, where are they, who's on the board, what services do they buy, anything like that. News feeds, if you've got things like Sourcebreaker in your business, you can find out the news. There's other ways of doing it. I know CRM stuff, but it's just about intelligently taking time to find out as much as you can about the clients and using that radar, if you like, to find out other leads that you can use.
And you get the prize today, Dave, for using the best word, no question, ubiquitous. I like it, and I think you get that prize for the best word of the webinar. Congratulations.
So useless.
I think that was the act that won Eurovision, wasn't it?
So
that's why
so useless facts of the day then. Useless fact of the day: Radar on MASH only showed his left hand 5 times in the whole series.
Oh, God, how do you know that? That's a
Because
crazy fact.
I read it somewhere yesterday. It was how bizarre that it came up today. For me, I thought, where do I start with this? Because you could talk about tech, you could talk about all sorts of things. So I said, right, let's go simple. Okay. So to me, the first place I'd look, if a client's hiding in plain sight, I'd start to look at my financial packages, and I'd look at what clients I've built over the last 3 to 5 years and who's dropped through the net. I'd then go to my CRM and I'd look at every role that I've worked in the last 3 to 5 years, and I'd check whether that manager is still working for the same company or have they moved on? Because have I got an opportunity to rebuild on that relationship and develop that relationship? I would then start to connect to buying managers on social media platforms of companies that I want to work with, but rather than just doing the usual thing, scraping data, putting it on, I've got 1 million followers on LinkedIn, I'll be scraping the data off their LinkedIn. So at least I've got an email address that I can put in an email campaign so I can start the initial acquisition stage from there. So you mentioned Sourcebreaker, Dave. You've got tools like Pager that can help you find clients who are advertising jobs, help you find buyers, help you find their details, etc. They'll actually give you posts, etc. So all of these things there. But what I'd be starting to do is get that initial data so I can then start to have a formulated list that I can start to call people. And the easiest place is go back to the people that I've already started to sell to. And I think we forget about that constantly. And it's not just the people where we've made placements. When we start to look at the amount of requirements that we never place, it's talking to all of those people as well. And that's where I'd start to track. So all your email tools, look at who's opened, who's clicked on the links, call them instantly and work on that sort of front. So I think there's so much we could go on about that. It's unbelievable. Okay. So next question then. Radar, how many times did he show his left hand? No. What are the most effective strategies for engaging with clients who might not be actively seeking recruitment services but could benefit from them?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, I think what's good about this particular webinar is that I feel like there's a mixture between in our discussion, a mixture between using good old-fashioned methods and new methods that we often make reference to. This one strikes me as good old-fashioned. I always say to people, because it's been the way I've worked since the 70s, that if you want to demonstrate that you know what you're doing and that you're relevant to clients, both current and potential, offer them candidates that you know they might be interested in. I mean, to be honest, if you look at it from a retail perspective, what do retailers do in the high street? They put in their shop window their best products to try and entice people to come through the door. We may not buy the products we see in the window, but we're in the store, and we end up buying several things and walking out. In my case, with a big yellow bag down to Bond Street, but that's another story for another day. So I think the thing is, the best method for us to get noticed in our sectors is to be constantly offering good quality candidates that our intelligence tells us those particular organizations may or may not be interested in at the moment. I think a lot of the time when we talk to consultants about the old-fashioned word about spec calling, is that they feel that, well, probably they're not recruiting at the moment. Well, I think it's a reasonable perspective. They're probably not recruiting at the moment. But in one shape or form, if you're consistently flagging the quality of candidates that you believe those employers may be interested in, at some point down the line, they will remember that you're a recruitment business or you're a recruitment professional who is consistently demonstrating that you have the caliber of candidates that they have a space for. Now, I think that's an old-fashioned method, all right, but it certainly works. And you have to be an expert in your space, visible in your space. What do we do for a living? We find great candidates, great jobs, and therefore we have opportunities every single day of taking our most valued candidates out to the market. And that's about offering them to our current clients, of course, but also to be consistently offering them to potential organizations that would use our services in the future.
In addition to that as well, I think in some cases, forget necessarily about promoting your business as a recruiter and actually promote the services you provide. Maybe you could could create a PDF. Maybe you could create a little TikTok video. Maybe you could create a post on LinkedIn, which just talks about recruitment services. Many of our clients don't really know what we do. They think we just provide people. Yeah, well, clearly we do, but there's a lot more to it than that. And as recruiters, as seasoned recruiters, we know that. But let's not assume that our clients do. And many of our clients are getting younger and younger. It's a bit like the old joke about the policemen seem younger these days. Yeah, well, one of my friend's sons has become a policeman. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my word, even my friend's sons are looking younger these days. Yeah? But it's that thing of the buyers, our TAs in
Yeah.
many cases, rather than clients that we used to know. So do they really understand what we do? So instead of promoting our business, promote our services. And of course, as you're promoting that, as you're delivering that information, you've got your brand on there anyway. But you're not selling your brand, you're selling what you do.
So I think from me, if I'm looking at sort of clients that are actively seeking services that we could sell to them, I'd start to separate my client base out, and I'd have my buying clients, lapsed clients. When I talk lapsed clients, I'm talking about clients that haven't bought in the last 3 months. And then I'd talk about new clients. So if you look about face-to-face selling, which is what we talked a lot today about, to buying clients, I think that's critical. Getting out and seeing your clients, selling your services, measuring your service and how they've done it and how they feel about your service, and then seeking new opportunities to create and deliver new services to them is critical. I think moving on to your lapsed clients, then remarketing to your lapsed clients, and then following that buying clients methodology is really important. But then you've got your new clients. And I think we have this broad brush of new clients. I'd have a very small target list. I'd know who in that target list I'm trying to approach. And then I'd take that pre-acquisition marketing strategy out there to try and get them interested in what I'm talking about. And then I'd be following up with telephone calls. And we go back to that stat that we've pulled out many, many times, that it's something like 40 odd percent of salespeople never make a second call. And after about the third call, around about 80% don't make a third call. And so what it says is that they're not following up. So what's your telephone strategy? And that's not talking about have you got a job? It's talking about everything else that you could do. So you need to develop a sales strategy, and you need to be getting used to getting what we call that hard sell, but get training your people to actually deliver that. And I think the best way to get your services across is to visit your clients face to face and have your marketing constantly providing social proof of the quality of your service over and over again. So I think we're saying all the same thing, but we're all sort of making it flow into the same sort of area and working from there. So how can a recruitment agency assess whether their consultants are targeting the right pipeline, and what metrics should you use to measure this?
I'm gonna say something kind of controversial here, and that
woo,
is,
woo.
let's just can we be clear that our consultants know what the appropriate pipeline is? Do we give them the right direction? Do we make it very clear what kind of organizations we want to target by way of the perfect client? What does the perfect client look like to us? Our ideal customer profile, ICP as it's now called. What does it look like? Do our consultants know that? Where were they likely to find these organizations? And what about candidates? Because if you're looking about ICPs, so ideal customer profile, what does our ICP stand for when it's talking about candidates? So firstly, are you clear with your people? Do they know what it is we should be aiming at and what we don't want? What kind of organizations do we not want to trade with? What kind of sectors do we not want to get involved in? What about the makeup of the organizations? Are we looking at corporations? Are we looking at SMEs, startups, and so forth? I mean, I think firstly, it starts with us, the people that run businesses. Are our people aware of what our targets are? So that's the first step. No good blaming them if they're aiming all their guns in all the wrong directions. Let's be very clear about what it is they need to be doing. And I think that that's where that begins. If you're talking about metrics, for me, again, I think that comes down to what's recorded on the CRM. I always talk to my clients about meaningful calls. How many meaningful calls do we ask our consultants to make every day? And what I mean by that is something that we record on the CRM. It's not you phone a client or a candidate and leave a message. That's not a meaningful call. I'm talking about a conversation, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes with either of those parties, where it is recorded, the information is recorded on the CRM. So we've got a record of a conversation that's given us a level of knowledge that we did not have prior to that conversation. That for me is a very important metric. And I don't, if we set 15 meaningful calls a day for our consultants, and that's a mixture of client and candidate conversations. Bear in mind, to have 15 meaningful calls, you probably have to make double that amount of phone calls or whatever it is. So whatever number you set, let's have it on the CRM. And for me, that's the best metric. I think there's a direct line between the amount of meaningful calls we make and the amount of business we pick up and placements or contractors or temps we send out. It begins with there. So for me, it's a fairly straightforward answer. Meaningful calls is the metric I'm looking at.
I think for me, consultants behave in the way that they are rewarded. So if your comp plan says, for example, deliver £120,000 of business this year, how do you break that down? You may have said they did 110 last year, they'll do 120 this year. They did 80 last year, they've got to do 90. How? What is your expectation? And what do you want them to do? How do you want them to behave? And if you break it down, I think that's one way of measuring how successful your consultants will be. For example, if you targeted your consultants on 8 customer referrals in 2024, that's customers who are advocates for your business and have recommended you or your business to another client, to another prospect. 8 may sound a lot. I don't know how it works for each particular business. But if you get them to behave in that way, to ask those questions, then they're more likely to deliver you new prospects, new clients. So for me, it's all about how you reward them in that comp plan and what you expect them to do.
Agreed. So I think I knew this question would probably have 3 different answers rather than sort of, but I think there's a thread through these answers. So I'd go back to my last answer and I'd separate my client base out into buying clients, lapse clients, and new clients. And for buying clients, I'd measure job to placement ratios. So how good is my service to my client? You know, if I'm getting 10 jobs, I'm only placing 2, I've got a problem. I'd then look at my lapsed clients and I'd probably look at meeting to jobs or new terms ratios that I get from going out and meeting those clients. And then I'd look at my placement ratios for there. But for new clients, exactly what Dave's saying is how are you going to get your new clients? So new meetings booked, meetings converted into requirements or into terms of business, etc. If your placement ratios are low, I think you've got to start to look at your service and you've got to start to educate your consultants, which goes back to Paul's, whether they stick, ditch, or educate your client. So either you're going to educate a client or you're going to ditch your client. But if you're sticking with a client, then you're doing nothing because you're not actually helping and developing your service to deliver to that client. So I was doing a session yesterday with a client and it was really interesting. We sort of over the last 2-3 months, we've been sort of changing how she works and what she works on. And she said yesterday, she's just done her stats over the last 3 months. She's worked 35% less jobs, but her placement ratio has gone from 3 out of 10 3 out of 10 requirements filled to 7 out of 10. So she's making more gross profit, but making less placements and having less time redundant. So we've got to start to think, if you start to look at quality, and therefore I'd be looking at what are you hiding behind? So if your KPIs are saying that you've got a low placement ratio, are you hiding behind poor qualified clients and poor qualified jobs? What should you do with that? And I think we've got to start to look at our consultants and what Paul says. Do we know what a good client looks like? Do we know what a good requirement looks like? Therefore, we should be grading each role and not hiding behind rubbish. And once we start that process, you start to get your consultants to be far more focused. And that's what she said. She said, when we first started, they were all skeptical about it, but they're now all really focused because you now understand what they're looking for rather than what they're not looking for. and they're not looking at rubbish, and they're getting better jobs in, and their job numbers starting to slightly increase because it's taken 2 or 3 months to get that process right. And now their job numbers are going to increase, but they're going to keep their placement ratios the same. So it's an important move forward for them. So in a market where the client holds significant power, what adjustments recruitment?
Guys.
You're right, Paul. So in a market where clients hold significant power, Dave, what adjustments should recruitment firms make to approach in order to stay competitive?
Can I be slightly controversial then on this question and actually try to flip our mindset? I think we as recruiters are the ones that hold the power, but we often think that it's the client that holds the power. Of course, the client pays us for our service. But if we approach it that they're the client up here and we're the supplier, the recruitment company down here, I think we'll always then believe that they're the powerful ones and we're not. We know where the talent is. We know how much the talent costs. We know how many people there are and how many people are on. We have significant power, and I think we have to adopt that in every single business call, in every single LinkedIn post, in every single transaction that we do with clients. We're the brokers of the talent or the talent service, whatever that service is that we provide. And we have to encourage our consultants to think that they are equal to the clients that they're speaking to. Because in the same way, if you're dealing with Coca-Cola and they know bottling and they know merchandising and they know marketing, we know talent. We are the talent providers, and we have to think like that. So I'd slightly change it the other way around and say we're the ones with the power. We just need to share that more effectively.
If I could just add, I'm sorry about this, but I'm going to have to go in a second for reasons you guys understand. I agree with Dave. I think that, and you've rephrased this, Howard, the clients hold significant power. It's a fair point. But I do agree with Dave to a large extent here that if we have the right candidates, if we are positioning ourselves as industry experts in our sectors, in our space, and we attract the right caliber of individual, people that our clients find difficult to find. And I think a lot of that comes down to being aware of the best candidates in the market, not on the market. So back to your point, Howard, about making good use of our CRM, keeping in touch with people. If we are only able to find candidates that our clients could find directly, then we're not much use to anybody, and frankly, they're not going to use us. So making sure we know our stuff and are seen as experts, industry experts, I think gives us a lot of significant power. And I think it's a great point that Dave makes. Staying competitive is all about being relevant. So it's not just about my point about finding great candidates and making sure our clients are fully aware of that, and potential clients, but it's also very much about making certain that we're highly visible, we're seen as industry experts, that we're consistently seen on social media and in all its ways and methods, and that we're seen face to face by our clients and prospective clients consistently too.
I think we've talked about building a CVP. We've talked about marketing. We've talked about branding. We've talked about campaigns, visiting our clients, measuring what counts. I think what Dave's talking about and what Paul's talking about is absolutely right. But I think we're missing one vital part, that I'd be looking at my consultants and I'd be training them to deliver my strategy. They need to understand my strategy first and foremost, and we need to understand what good execution looks like of that strategy. So I'd be asking them and using the measures of how they execute the strategy to see whether my strategy is actually working. I'm not going to sit there and be pig-headed and go, that's my strategy, just work harder and harder if it's not bringing the right results in. So I want them to look at that. So I'm going to strain my staff to deliver, review the results, and either address the strategy or the execution with honesty. And if that's a team effort, then the staff will be able to tell me if my strategy is poor or where the blockages are in my strategy. And therefore, we can start to educate them on about the execution, and we can help get better execution. So if you're doing the same as before, then you're going to get the same results. But what's going to happen is the market's changed, and therefore your results will change with the market. So we need to have a review of your strategy, and you need to have a review of the execution of that strategy, I think. And therefore, it's all about training your staff to deliver. So if you can build a great CVP, brilliant. If you get a great marketing campaign, brilliant. But if your staff can't deliver it, and your staff can't sell it, and your staff can't do it, then everything else is redundant. So review your strategy, review the execution of that strategy and how they link together.
And how can I answer? Richard's just put an excellent question, which absolutely ties in with your point about how do recruitment owners feel often about actually changing their CVP. And I think some of that, Richard, for me, in my experience, is it depends where they are on their journey. You know, I meet recruitment owners who've been doing this job for 15, 16 years, and nothing has really happened to the business. It's given them a good income, challenging at times, good at other times, but they're doing the same sort of thing. They haven't really moved with the market. So I think my answer to your question is owners are happy to look at their CVP when there is something material that happens. Either it's tough times or they can't find the candidates or the market's changed, or they hit upon a seam of business opportunity. For example, one of my clients has opened a search practice and it's absolutely booming. So they develop the CVP around that. So I do think people are happy, but often you do what you know, what you feel most comfortable with. But now there's so much information available out there to change. As long as you can execute on the change, I think you can do whatever you think is right.
I think in a market when we're talking about people surviving, my instant thought goes back to Darwin. It's not the strongest that survive. That's not what Darwin said. It was those that adapt that survive. And it's the adapt of the fittest that survives. And I think if you're not adapting your CVP, your sales strategy, etc., then you're getting further and further away from what the market's going to be like in the next 2 or 3 years. And therefore, are you limiting your opportunity to grow, scale, or are you just going to become a market that's either surviving or going to die away? So I think you've got to start looking at that, Richard. And we've had this conversation for a lot of years, Richard, about how that works. And I think you've got to start to look at your service and keep developing your service, keep making your service in line with what the market expectation is. And I suppose that leads to the last question, which is an interesting question considering what I've just said, is what training and development practices can help ensure that consultants are equipped to navigate the complexities of a client-driven market effectively.
And I think that goes back to training our consultants, and training all of our staff that are customer facing. Three things that I don't think we train as well as we could on. Understanding of procurement. Why do buyers buy the way they buy? If you can, send your consultants on a procurement course or an online course to understand what is it that makes people behave the way they do or buy the way they do. The second one is about buying behavior. What are the different styles of buying behavior? Motivation, purpose, that sort of thing. And the other one is client understanding. What does it really mean to understand what a client is? Take the individuals, as Annette pointed to on an answer earlier on, but also the individuals, the client itself. Understand your clients, understand buying behavior, understand procurement.
So I think I'm going to take that, Dave, and simplify it a little bit, because I think you're right. That's part of that. So I'd be training the people on how to book meetings and how to manage a meeting. And I think I'd then start that a little bit earlier. Really good practice on sales calls. Let's properly start to get sales calls moving, getting past the gatekeeper, getting the right details, extracting the right information that will help you, how to sell your CVP, and how to genuinely close down business so it's right. And I think it all starts by sort of having the right data. And so I'll be training my staff to use the systems properly, which goes back to what Paul was saying about the CRM. And so we can let the data determine where our processes are winning, our processes are failing, and where we need to be better. And I think, to me, if we're going to differentiate ourselves from our competitors, having a better sale, having a better conversation with our clients, having a conversation that makes it a two-way street, not just asking about recruitment, but asking deeper questions, buying cycles, etc., will help us get further into that client rather than as being always on the outskirts on the client and being, as everyone keeps describing us, as a necessary evil. We should be actually a necessary, absolutely inside the client. And I think your first comment, Dave, right early on in the webinar is right, is that you've got clients talking to your recruitment agency about what the clients actually want. And I've said this for years, when clients decide what they're recruiting, they never have a recruiter inside that conversation, and therefore salaries, rates, etc., are never discussed. And there sometimes is a massive mitch about what's actually available in the market for what price and what's the candidate flow look like in that marketplace. But we do exactly the same when we start to invent our CVP. You're doing the right thing there, Dave, with your client, of bringing clients in to talk to them so they can actually do or develop a CVP that actually means something to the clients rather than what we think it means. So I think it's been a great conversation. I think it's a great sort of point for everybody to move up forward from. So Dave, thanks very much for your input. Paul's had to nip off. He's had a
who was that guy that appeared and then disappeared?
Some guy from the 70s. I've no idea. But there you go. But no, but he's had to go. He's doing something he had to do instantly, so he's gone somewhere. But he'll be back next week, hopefully. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. This full series of webinars has now come to a close. We're now developing a new set of webinars for the next 4 weeks. So, if you've got any topics, feel free to email with any topics that you want us to cover, and we'll gladly start to put them in. We've got some planned, but I just want to flesh those out. But if anyone wants something different, then feel free to drop us a line. Dave, once again, thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you all next week.
See you next week. Have a good week, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.